Hello and welcome to this leadership short video. I'm Jean Hardacre, part of the faculty team in the NHS Leadership Academy. This video will explore the challenges and possibilities of leading teams that are moving to hybrid working. This term, hybrid working, refers to a mix of working practices in terms of where and when we do our work. Accompanying the video, there's a summary document which you might find useful to refer to and possibly download as you watch the video. This is available to download in the Leadership Shorts section of the South East Leadership Academy website. You might also wish to come along to one of our interactive Zoom workshops on this topic, where you'll have a chance to explore hybrid working further, particularly applying the ideas to your own leadership context in practical terms. Details of these workshops are available under the Leadership Espresso section of the South East Leadership Academy website. So in this video, we'll firstly highlight the fundamental shifts in thinking which hybrid working is creating in our work and in our leadership. If you're trying to work out how hybrid working might look in your teams and in your leadership, we'll offer some initial prompts here to help you think this through. And then the main part of the video, we'll move on to consider the leadership mindset and approach which might be needed to enable effective hybrid working in your own context. So rapid developments in flexible and remote working are bringing opportunities to improve the way we work together, and also with that, potential pitfalls. As lockdown restrictions change, some of our colleagues will want or need to return to a shared workspace. And for others, working from home or remotely might be a viable or preferable option. As leaders, we face the practical and cultural dilemmas of leading and managing our colleagues in hybrid teams where one size is unlikely to fit all. There's no blueprint for how to do this and how to lead our teams into hybrid working. Most organisations are working out what their approach will be and navigating the HR, legal and contractual considerations. And of course, these will all underpin what's possible in your own context. But whether your teams are dispersed together or a mix of both, as a leader, you have a key role in creating a climate where colleagues can thrive and do their best work for patients and the public. And your mindset and behaviour as a leader will be a key part of enabling this. So how are we thinking about hybrid working? Do you find yourself viewing this as a problem to solve, maybe? It's certainly complex and complicated. Perhaps we could reframe the way we're thinking about this, away from it being a tricky thing that we need to sort out, into thinking about it maybe as a chance to do some better work together and find different and possibly new, improved ways of working together. Have a look at what Linda Grattan wrote recently in Harvard Business Review. She has proposed that actually we have here as leaders a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reset our work using a hybrid model, and that if we get this right, then it may actually enable us to move into 21st century working, which feels more purposeful and more focused on good outcomes with more agility and flexibility within it. So it is possible that we might have an opportunity here, albeit it all feels maybe somewhat overwhelming and complicated right now. During the pandemic, lots has changed about the way we think and feel about work and life. And our expectations seem to have shifted in ways which are probably not going to return to how they were before. So let's just have a look at some of these key shifts before we dive into exploring some of the detail of hybrid working. One of the things that we are noticing is a shift in expectations between ourselves and our employer, or if we're leaders, ourselves and our employees. What is an employer actually buying from a member of staff? Is it hours of their time? Is it their physical presence? Is it results and outcomes, regardless of where or how or when it's achieved? Or is it something else, or a combination of all of these? And what does a member of staff now expect from their employer? Of course, this will vary, but we can be fairly sure that many of us want and expect different things from our employer than perhaps we did before the pandemic. There are also going to be changes in what people expect in terms of how work and life balance. And the almost universal working from home that has been a bit of an experiment born out of necessity during the pandemic for many people, it has challenged a lot of what we perhaps used to understand regarding work-life balance. So am I working from home? Am I feeling as if I'm living at work? What works for me? What's fair? Does that fit with what's needed by my patients, my clients, my colleagues, my organisation? All big questions that underpin some of our thinking as leaders as we decide how to create a culture to nurture hybrid working. Another aspect of our expectations, which you may have noticed has shifted, is that if work isn't being defined by being co-located, then what will help us to do good work together and what might get in the way? How are we going to want to connect and communicate? And what will good team working look like? And fourthly, the expectations we have of ourselves as leaders, and indeed that others may have of us as leaders. How do I lead if I can't see what people are doing? I can't see where they are sometimes, who they're with. How do I add any value in my leadership in this way of working? And what kind of leadership support am I looking for from my managers? Is it the same as before the pandemic? Or do I need to do something different? Or do I need other things now to help me do my best work? So when we start thinking about our own shifts in expectations, it raises a question of what could hybrid working mean for our teams, for your teams? And it requires us to carefully consider some fundamental questions about how we best use the time and energy we have available for work. So in your teams, which parts of your work need colleagues to be in the same physical space? When is proximity actually needed to get really good quality work done? And when does being together as colleagues really, really matter? Are there parts of the work that are better suited to remote or solo working for whatever reason? And how could remote working potentially be advantageous for some of the work that we do? So these are all big questions, and some of the decisions might be centrally determined in your context. However, you may have some agency or discretion around some of these decisions. And if so, it can be useful to think this through and to actually openly consider these questions with your colleagues, to partly come up with ideas about what might work, and also to help colleagues appreciate the complexities involved in making the decisions about what hybrid working is going to look like. So these are just some prompts to think through and possibly to have conversations about how hybrid working could be designed effectively in your teams and designed deliberately with intent. So moving on then to thinking about the mindset and the behaviours for us as leaders, that's going to create a culture where hybrid working is likely to be effective. There's no neat formula or set of answers around hybrid working. At the moment, We're finding our way and we're navigating through, trying to work out what is going to work best. So a commute into a workplace is a stressful rush for one person and a relaxing chance to think and reflect for another person. Working from home might mean a welcome chance to work uninterrupted for some of us, and it might mean really horrible, lonely isolation for others of us. And maybe it's a cocktail of children, pets, and video calls, all things to juggle for another person. For some, it can be working at home, and for others, it can start to feel like living at work. So what we do know is that how, where, and when people do their work does have a huge impact on their well-being. And a person's well-being obviously really affects how well they can do their job. And if someone's work pattern makes them feel happier, healthier, and more in control, they are more likely to do their best work. So how much agency and control and autonomy are you willing or able to give to your colleagues about how they do their work? This will vary considerably depending on your context, and it may also relate to your own leadership style and your comfort zone. And it will also be impacted by the broader culture and organisational context that you work in. However, it's worth just holding the mirror up a little bit to yourself and asking ourselves a couple of questions around this. If we did enable people to have more control and autonomy in the work that we're doing, what might be the pros and cons of that? And if we intentionally restrict or contain the control and autonomy that people have over their work, what would be the possible risks in that and the opportunities in it? Whatever hybrid working arrangements you're considering, it's worth thinking about how they will accentuate or support the values and cultures that you're trying to achieve. What are these in your place of work and in your context? And what would this look like practically if you design hybrid working to absolutely align with the cultures, behaviours and ways of working that we want for our patients? The Leadership Bite resource, which I mentioned earlier, contains some activities to help you think through some of these issues through a bit further. And they will also be areas that we will explore in the virtual workshops if you're able to come along to any of those. So leading teams through hybrid working may need you to sort of use your own time and attention differently as a leader. So we're going to just now explore a few ideas about the roles you might need to adopt as a leader in order to nurture effective hybrid working. There are no quick and easy answers to this, and this is not intended to be offered as a top tips approach. It's offered for us to consider, for you to reflect on, and for us to find our way through the next few weeks and months in ways which are suitable and conducive to what our own services need. Some of these practices will feel very natural and part of your everyday leadership anyway, and others might feel a little more uncomfortable, and they might be different from how you've led and managed people in the past. So there's again an activity in the Leadership Bite document to help you reflect on some of these mindsets and behaviours, and to reflect on your own practice and to consider maybe how these apply in your own approach as a leader. So the first one of these is being a well-being prioritiser, being a leader who is a well-being prioritiser. Most, if not all of us, are and probably have been below par in our well-being after a very difficult experience of COVID, some of which we're still coming to terms with and experiencing. We all know how much it matters to feel well, to do our best work. And given our experiences of the pandemic, well-being we would argue, can no longer be a nice to have. It must be a core priority for us as leaders. There's no doubt that the good intentions are there in health and social care to offer well-being opportunities and culture of well-being to colleagues. Yet in reality and in everyday practice, it can be very tricky to prioritise well-being when we're under such pressure to deliver. So an example might be a question around how is it congruent to signpost staff to mental health self-help apps on the one hand, whilst expecting someone to answer emails at 10 o'clock in the evening on the other hand. To what extent are we modelling a culture where how we're doing goes hand in hand with what we're doing? Maybe reflect on whether there are any inconsistencies in your own leadership practice that you could iron out in this respect. We all have stuff to learn, and we can all continue to learn about this together. Nurturing psychological safety also enables well-being in that it helps people to be more open about how they feel and what they think. So to what extent are we embedding psychological safety and developing psychological safety in our teams into our everyday work? Psychological safety doesn't mean cosy and consensual. It means it enables difficult things to be said and difficult conversations to happen with candour and compassion. And whilst psychological safety isn't a focus of this session, it absolutely will be at the heart of some of our discussions in the workshop, and there are other alternative resources on this within the South East Leadership Academy website. So another role that we may want to reflect on is around being an outcome clarifier. So hybrid working will arguably mean a shift away from focusing on merely the inputs, such as counting time and counting hours spent on work, and possibly more focusing on the outcomes and the outcomes we achieve. Most of the time, I'm sure you would agree that most people working in healthcare are looking for guidance and enabling support rather than a controlling, directive approach. It doesn't apply to everybody, but for the vast majority, this is what people thrive within the most. Micromanagement isn't conducive with hybrid working for all sorts of reasons. Letting go of the detail of knowing exactly who's doing what, where, and when may be uncomfortable for some of us. And for some of us, it might provide a welcome opportunity to develop people's confidence and skills so that looking over people's shoulders feels less necessary. With remote working becoming more embedded into our working lives, some people are suggesting that it's a chance to move away from presenteeism and into a more outcomes-based approach to measuring effectiveness and productivity. And I'd invite you, I suppose, whilst I'm aware that this may sound audacious maybe and unrealistic in your setting, I'd invite you to try and keep an open mind in these early stages of exploring hybrid working. We arguably have a once in a career chance to change the way we add value as leaders. Another way in which we can consider our leadership in this context is in terms of our behaviour and mindset being an obstacle unblocker. So many of you will be doing the jobs you do because you're good at fixing things, you're good at solving problems. And this is, of course, a fabulous skill set to have. And we wouldn't have got this far in our health and social care support for the pandemic if it wasn't for all of those skills. However, if we're working at a distance and asynchronously more of the time, how realistic is it for you to be directly involved in sorting out issues? Where and when could it be more effective for your colleagues to work out the best thing to do without always checking with you? How could you potentially help unblock obstacles in the way for other people without getting entangled in the detail? So it's an invitation to reflect on how this could potentially work in your context. In terms of keeping in touch and staying connected within this context of hybrid working, being a keeper in touch will be a key role. And this is both for your own benefit and also for the benefit and support of colleagues. So how you do this, how often and by what means, will absolutely vary depending on your working environment and all sorts of other factors. It can be helpful to stop and consider, what needs do I have as a leader for keeping in touch with my colleagues and to lead and manage them effectively? And what are their needs in this respect? So from this, what combination of contact, meetings, catch-ups, formal or informal, will potentially meet as many of our different needs as possible? To what extent are you comfortable for various forums and approaches to emerge and be self-organising amongst your colleagues alongside more informal get-togethers? What can you say and do to create the conditions for people to connect in the ways they need to? And to what extent do you see this as your responsibility to organise, or is it something that you can enable and encourage amongst others? In my work with teams who are moving to hybrid working, there's often a concern about how to maintain informal social contact, like the human glue between scheduled meetings. And it can prove challenging on our virtual platforms, particularly if some people are in physical proximity. How much agency are we giving to colleagues to decide how to use their time on informal social connections? Do you think people are maybe waiting for permission for this and assuming that it's not viewed as real work? Do we as leaders wish to be explicit and more encouraging that actually this is a legitimate way to spend our time, given that teamwork underpins high quality care? In terms of informal staying connected, it's not always straightforward. Some people love having the chance for a virtual coffee break or weekly quizzes and all sorts of other things that teams have invented and designed. And others dread the sense of what is sometimes called forced fun, which for others can feel less attractive. So being open to a blend of approaches can really help, so that we can accommodate both those emergent, pop-up, spontaneous types of informal get-togethers, as well as the more scheduled times to catch up together. Another aspect of being an effective keeper in touch in our leadership is ensuring that hybrid working is inclusive. So watch out for groups that might be in the know and others that might be feeling out of the loop. Stay alert to dynamics and ways of working which might inadvertently and unconsciously exclude colleagues when they're working at a distance or maybe working asynchronously. What are your options as a leader to help colleagues stay connected to people that you're not seeing? And how might you know? What will the signals be that you're looking out for if colleagues are feeling marginalised by hybrid working? What actions can you take to promote and spread inclusive ways of working? Building on the keeping in touch, with hybrid working, the incidental conversations which happen when we're all in the same workplace at the same time are less common. This means that when we do connect, virtually or in person, the quality of our conversations is even more important. As a leader, your facilitation skills to help people have good communication, good conversations, and effective dialogue will be needed more than ever. And this might involve experimenting with different ways of running meetings, new ways of discussing issues or novel approaches to dividing up the time we have together. How could you adapt your approach maybe to agenda setting, meeting etiquette and chairing to be fit for purpose in a hybrid world? We all know the value of having someone to listen to us, and yet it's easier said than done given the pressure we're all under. Being available to listen tends to sometimes fall down the priority list when we're up against meeting deadlines, hitting activity targets, and doing the doing. Remember that paying attention and listening is a core part of compassionate leadership and underpins an empathic approach. And it's also at the heart of supporting people's well-being. So we could ask ourselves, how much of a priority are we giving to this in our average working week to embed it into the culture of how we work together? The boundaries between work and home can feel altogether more blurred for teams when we're embracing hybrid working. As a leader, your boundaries may feel difficult to maintain as well. It might include boundaries around your time, your attention, your energy, your emotion, and your own need for rest. How can you remain available, accessible, and effective, whilst also maintaining the boundaries that you need to keep yourself well? Research from Brené Brown at Houston University is highlighting the importance of leaders being clear about their boundaries in order to remain compassionate. It's not a selfish thing to do. It's core to being effective in your leadership. If you, as a leader, are feeling taken for granted or taken advantage of, this can quickly knock you out of a compassionate mindset and approach. So when do you sometimes feel that your boundaries are not clear enough at work? And what impact does this have? What conversations with colleagues would maybe help you clarify your boundaries and help them to hold their own? What could you do differently to model the importance of agreeing and upholding boundaries? Pretending things are fine when they're not, glossing over inconvenient or uncomfortable truths, giving the impression that we know what to do when we sometimes don't. These are all patterns of pre-COVID behaviour which we may recognise in many of our organisations and services, which arguably didn't serve us terribly well before, and which certainly won't help us through the other side of hybrid working. Being honest about the complexities of hybrid working is what will probably be more helpful. It may mean some people not getting everything they want the way they want it. Most people will need to compromise in some shape or form, but at least their frustrations won't be compounded by a suspicion that the true situation or the true options are somehow being disguised. Some honest conversations about what patients and services and the organisation needs are a really good starting point. Acknowledging the tensions with colleagues is really important, alongside being open to ideas, interested in feedback, and really keen to get input from different perspectives. And of course, a perfect solution to hybrid working, one which pleases everyone, is really unlikely. Juggling so many variables, preferences, and needs is possibly going to leave some people feeling resentful and disappointed, and other people feeling happy and satisfied, but maybe guilty for having a working option that suits them when they know that other people are less content. It may also help then to trial various different approaches and to not set in stone our approach from the very beginning. We're in new territory here, all of us together, and so possibly it might be worthwhile considering some experimentation with our colleagues alongside us, and then reviewing after a trial period how the different arrangements have been experienced and how they've gone. So in the spirit of experimenting, let's keep learning together about all of this work around hybrid working. I look forward to exploring this all more with some of you in the Leadership Espresso workshops. Feel free to keep in touch, keep an open mind, and let us know what works for you. Thank you for watching.